welcome back to Inside College Basketball Now with Jon Rothstein here on CBS Sports Network. The second big thing I want to get into is the fact that adversity has hit BYU. Now, I went to Provo in the preseason, spent the day at BYU, watched practice, got obviously the lay of the land for this season because I felt it was really important to have boots on the ground in Provo, thinking about what lies ahead this season with BYU getting Rob Wright out of the transfer portal, with BYU retaining Richie Saunders, with BYU obviously getting a commitment from AJ DeBansa, who's going to be one of the top 2 or 3 picks in the 2026 NBA draft. And as I talked about when I did show after show here during the offseason, this was, in my opinion, the most anticipated season in the history of BYU's program, simply because of the fact we didn't know when, again, BYU would have this type of talent in its basketball program. Now, when I went to practice in Provo, the biggest thing I took away after watching practice was I did not know if BYU had enough depth and enough options outside of its primary guys. And I think now what we're seeing is that come to fruition. BYU's big three, Wright, Saunders, and DeBansa, combined for 71 of its 92 points last night in a loss at Oklahoma State, who's a very, very potent offensive team under Steve Lutz. And with the win last night in Stillwater, is starting to play its way now into the NCAA tournament bubble picture. It was a big win for them. You know, Oklahoma State's also beaten Texas A&M and UCF this year. But I think we're seeing now a recurring theme. And BYU, to its credit, played a very difficult non-conference schedule. Went to Boston to play UConn. Played that game without Kennard Davis, and also Keba Keita got injured in that game, but made a big second-half comeback in that game. Beat Wisconsin in Salt Lake. Came back to beat Clemson at Madison Square Garden. But now that we are in the guts of Big 12 play, it's pretty clear to me that BYU's defensive ability is not where it needs to be to compete with the top teams in the league. And also BYU's depth around its big three of Wright, DeBansa, and Saunders is not up to par with the other teams in the conference. BYU, in losses in Big 12 play, at Texas Tech, at Kansas, and at home against Arizona, is giving up over 88 points per game. And again, BYU gave up 99 in Stillwater last night against Oklahoma State. So, for the first time this season, there's major adversity in Provo. For the first time this season, we have BYU at a little bit of a crossroads. And it's not going to get any easier. As you can see the schedule right there, Houston, the bully of the conference, the team that has obviously dominated the league since it came over from the American Conference under Kelvin Sampson, is now coming to Provo on Saturday. It gets a little bit easier, but not too much easier when you have at Baylor and Colorado. Then there's at Arizona on February 18th and a home game against Iowa State on the 21st. Now, one good thing when you look at the remaining schedule for BYU is BYU, other than a trip to Arizona, Houston, Iowa State, and Texas Tech all come to Provo. So that is a positive. Now, you're going to obviously have to beat some of the best teams in the country, but only one more time will you be in a situation where you're going on an opponent's home floor. But here's the bottom line when it comes to BYU. We have now a scenario where the stars on this team are getting their fill. The stars on this team are producing, as I mentioned, Wright, DeBansa, and Saunders combined for 71. So Saunders combined for 71 of the team's 92 points against Oklahoma State. But you're starting to question a little bit how much this collection of players is going to be able to stop the truly elite teams. And that's directly related to Houston. And to me, Saturday night in Provo, 10:30 Eastern start, is a crossroads game for BYU. Because coming into the season, and I still believe it, based on sheer talent, not necessarily based on the team that was assembled, because you don't know in this climate until you see it come out in the wash. Based on sheer talent, to me, this felt like BYU's best chance to get to a Final Four. It's something that the BYU fan should be dreaming of when you get this type of talent. But so far, we have not seen BYU in a situation where it has performed and traded blows with a team that obviously is also mentioned with being the best team in the country. Played admirably against UConn. UConn got off to a big lead. BYU came back. Same thing against Arizona. Was right there with Texas Tech. Texas Tech, in my opinion, broke the game open late, and we know what last Saturday was against Kansas. Very similar to the UConn game and the Arizona game. Now, I think this, after being in Provo during the preseason, I think some season-ending injuries have snapped BYU's options on offense, and it's not getting enough attention. Dawson Baker, a spot-up shooter who obviously maybe not a lot of people know about, but could obviously open up the floor a little bit with his shot making. Losing him for the season, to me, was a big-time loss for BYU. He was a shot maker. He could open things up for Saunders, open things up for DeBonsa. And now, when you're looking at where this team goes when it goes to its bench, to me, there is a major drop-off compared to other teams and what we're seeing in the Big 12 at the top. And Saturday, you have Houston. Saturday, you have a Houston team that, in my opinion, isn't just, I would say, off the radar, but it feels like because there are so many other storylines in the conference this year, what's going on with Darren Peterson, what's going on with Arizona, Houston, the program that has been a 1 seed in each of the last 3 NCAA tournaments, is not maybe getting the proper attention it deserves. But this is a fantastic matchup on Saturday, which again is going to feature elite games all over the sport. I'm going to get into our next segment into what's going on in the Big Ten, but obviously we have Carolina and Duke. That's going to be obviously on Saturday. There's other big games I'm going to preview as well as we continue to march on. And I want to say this about the Carolina-Duke thing. I know that it's going to be fascinating to watch Wilson go against Boozer, and I know it's going to be fascinating to see if the Tar Heels can take that much of a step. I am curious to see in that game how Derek Dixon, North Carolina's freshman point guard who has moved into the starting lineup, and the Tar Heels have rolled off a winning streak since coming back from Northern California, losing to Stanford and Cal. I am curious to see how Derek Dixon does in that type of environment. Reminds me a little bit, and this is years ago, reminds me of when Roy Williams was using Larry Drew as his point guard. I believe it was the 10-11 season. Larry Drew wound up leaving North Carolina, transferring to UCLA, where he had a great senior year under Ben Howland. UCLA won the Pac-12 that year. But Larry Drew stepped away from the team. Kendall Marshall took over, ran away with things at the point guard spot, and then never looked back. That is what I'm seeing a little bit with Derek Dixon. Not that Derek Dixon is the same player as Kendall Marshall. This guy is not built in that breakneck point guard mold, where he has great speed and shiftiness. He's slow. He's methodical. He's got great size. He can see over defenses, but he will be stepping up a weight class against, obviously, a team in Duke that right now is in position to be a number 1 seed again in the NCAA tournament, and also has 1 loss this season at the Garden to Texas Tech, a game which Duke led by a large margin before the Red Raiders came back and got the victory. So there's a lot of big games coming up on Saturday. Obviously, the matchup between Houston and BYU, Carolina, Duke at the top.